Some I admire, some I idolize, but all of them I study. Ready for some wrestling homework?
Hey, it's Mike. Last year, I made a video where we had ourselves a bit of a chalk talk, and I walked you through some matches to study in an effort to better develop analytical goggles. Well, in this chalk talk, the matches you are being assigned to watch feature wrestlers that I think are the absolute best. Let's talk about who to watch and what to watch for. Ready? Let's dive in. Let's start with the first guy I studied religiously, Owen Hart. A guy I still go back to for inspiration time and time again. I first saw him as part of New Foundation with Jim the Anvil Neidhart, but I love every era of Owen's career. And yeah, I really do mean every era. High Energy? Yeah, I love High Energy. King of Hearts era? Love it. The awkward younger Owen stuff? I love all of that. When you watch Owen Hart, I want to challenge you to not just marvel at his wonderful mechanics, because let's be honest, he's got the best belly-to-belly suplex of all time, but also watch his performance. Specifically, watch how he gets the most out of in-between beats, like after he slaps a hold-on and acknowledges the camera. And in case you didn't know, Owen's timing on his bumps and sells is basically perfect. Watch how he shows up at the exact right time to get the most out of being bumped around. And yeah, few things in wrestling are perfect, but Owen Hart's timing is one of them. I don't want to fool you though. None of my favorite Owen matches are on YouTube, but the one I picked is pretty darn good. So good, I'm adding it right into a playlist of all of today's matches that will be waiting for you at the end of today's video, so you can dive right into the homework. Jushin Liger made me want to be a professional wrestler. I took the nickname Lightning in the early part of my career in tribute to him, and so we'd have a cool team name that one time we tagged together. I study Liger, of course, because his ring mechanics are stellar, but also because of how he conveys everything he is feeling and experiencing solely through body language. Because of his mask, his voice is almost completely muffled, and he cannot use his facial expressions to sell or emote. And remember, we only have 3 theatrical tools at our disposal. We have our voice, our face, and our body language. When you study Liger, study his body language. Watch how he overcomes the handicap of not being able to use 2 of his 3 theatrical tools, and yet he still tells a complete story. The match in this playlist is from an episode of WCW Monday Nitro, and it features Dean Malenko in his prime years. Dean Malenko and Jushin Liger together in a match is like getting a birthday cake on Christmas morning, so what more can you ask for? As Jim Crockett Promotions and the NWA are reaching a key turning point in the late 80s, 2 of the 4 horsemen jumped to the WWF, and they're rebranded there as the Brainbusters. Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard are disruptors before that term becomes a buzzword for entities that shake up business or industry. By that I mean, they disrupt the status quo of the World Wrestling Federation's Deep Tag Team division, which had a really distinct feel and pace to it. Hulkamania-era WWF has an overt formula to it, and in the 80s, that formula's making everyone a lot of money. But there's a style and a pride of workmanship to the team of Anderson and Blanchard, and they did not just neatly conform to the formula. They shook things up. That disrupted how tag matches were performed, and the result of this are a string of matches during their all-too-brief stay in the WWF that are still talked about and studied more than 30 years later. When you watch The Brainbusters, look at how their matches are structured. And yes, they are 3-act structures, but Dial into how fluidly they move between the acts. What do you notice about how the structure is hidden within the mechanics? Manami Toyota is the greatest female wrestler of all time, and each stage of her long-tenured career brings something new to the table. In the ring, she's extremely consistent, performing at the highest level without interruption for well over a decade. And while there's a lot to look for, including some brilliant suplex variations she seems to use for just one match and then discard, what you really need to focus on is her vocal performance. As much as Liger relies on his body language for storytelling, Toyota relies on her vocals for it. It outshines her facial expressions and her body language in practically all of her most famous bouts, including the one I've put into our playlist. While she is not the only Joshi to rely on vocals to augment her performance, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who does it better. And her matches are a joy to watch. Johnny Saint is a wonder to behold. The greatest counter-wrestler to ever lace up boots remains in a class unto himself, and therein lies the thing you want to look for when you're studying Johnny Saint. John has counters on top of counters, and he escapes like no one else. Part of what makes him so unique is how he incorporates idiosyncratic body language into each one of his movements. There are no basic wrist lock reversals here. Even the simplest of counters is a performance in and of itself. And while Saint is justly celebrated for his counter wrestling, you will no doubt notice the crispness and commitment to each hold he slaps on. He gets the very most out of the very least. He gets more out of a crank of an armbar than some wrestlers can get out of a Canadian destroyer. And even though many of his matches are what we would now refer to as chain wrestling and nothing else, you just can't take your eyes off him. Watch how he performs his counters and escapes. Solar is an ageless veteran of lucha libre. At 65 years old, he moves like a guy half his age. While he certainly does singles matches, like many luchadors, he is better equipped for tags and trios matches, where he can get in, deliver some razzle-dazzle, and then tag back out. This tag match, the one I've pulled for us, sees him against his most frequent opponent, Negro Navarro, and they are often booked as a peanut butter and jelly match. This also features a deservedly celebrated CMLL star in Valiente, as well as an underrated luchador with tons of experience, Virus. What you'll see El Solar demonstrating in this match is yave style, a fading dialect of lucha libre which vanishes a little more each year, as it is difficult to learn, and it's often criticized for its dance-like elegance. You will no doubt notice that it has a certain exhibition feel to it, as if El Solar is just showing off as opposed to trying to win. It doesn't feel like a fight at all. The illusion of conflict is almost absent in moments. For this reason, critics of yave style often say it is heartless or cold, and that it doesn't build to a climax. And yes, sometimes that can be the case if it's not infused with struggle or emotion. Regardless, El Solar is a guy to study, and when you do, study his transitions. How does one hold turn into the next? Like other practitioners of yave style, his transitions from hold to hold or from yave to yave are often complex, fluid, and unusual. Because Solar is such an accomplished performer, he often does these in a way that is easy to follow if you have a basic understanding of wrestling mechanics, and even setting that aside, I do love that you can plainly see how much fun he's having tossing people around and tying them in knots. If you love wrestling, then I think watching the original Tiger Mask Satoru Sayama wrestle his favorite opponent, Dynamite Kid, will just make you love wrestling even more. It will inspire you to work harder in the ring. Their series of matches between 1981 and 1983 are the stuff of legend for good reason, and any of them still hold up today. Watching Tiger Mask 1 and Dynamite Kid is an opportunity to see two masters at work, while both of them are at the height of their powers. Each of them's ahead of their time, but together, they advance the state of the art in wrestling like few pairings before or since. When you watch this match, it may be hard to shut off the fan part of your brain, but when you view it with your analytical goggles on, pay close attention to how they preserve the illusion of conflict, how they make this collection of spots and high-flying moves look and feel as if it is an actual contest between opponents, rather than a performance delivered by two dance partners. As much as I love El Solar, as much as I admire the Brainbusters, as much as I idolize Owen and Johnny, there's no better gift I can give you than Tiger Mask vs. Dynamite Kid. And the playlist I've assembled for you with all these matches in it is appearing on screen right now. Click it and dive in. And if you want to pull on the Tiger Mask thread, see how that links to Jushin Liger and beyond, it traces his influence forward from the 1980s, check out my book, Pro Wrestling History, 6 Threads and 16 Decades, because junior heavyweight style is one of the 6 threads we explore.